Hi, Tonya. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Annie?
I'm good. It's very nice to meet you. I think we've exchanged emails, right? Something.
Yeah, we've exchanged emails. I think we've met before at an ISV meeting.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
in the
Well,
past.
welcome to ISV. We're very glad to have you as a member of the International Society for Vaccines, and thank you so much for joining us. And we're looking forward to working with you to spread the word about the society, but also to improve education of younger people, encourage people to join the field, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really happy to have you here. And can you tell me a little bit about yourself and just your background? I know it's on the web, but I'm sure people want to hear from you,
Sure,
where you're from,
sure.
where you went to school, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'll just start by saying I'm thrilled to be a fellow of ISB. I'm really looking forward to contributing as much as I can to help further education of young vaccinologists. And there are a lot of people in the group that I know quite well. So, yeah, just looking forward to it. I think it's a really exciting time for vaccines. So, my name is Tonya Villafana, and I'm currently the Vice President and Global Franchise Head for Infectious Diseases at AstraZeneca. And I've been at AstraZeneca for about 12 years now. I joined when it was MedImmune and been working on vaccines and monoclonal antibodies for infectious disease the entire time I've been here, except for 2 years secondment I had to the World Bank, which I can also talk about. I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, so Caribbean island. I came to the US for school. I did my training in immunology and public health. I trained at Cornell University Graduate School of Medical Sciences in New York for my PhD in immunology. And my master's in public health was at Harvard. I have been working really in immunology and infectious disease since I finished graduate school at Harvard. But even as an undergrad, I worked with David Weiner actually on the first DNA vaccine. So I think I had, a great opportunity to begin my career in vaccines and infectious disease, very early on.
Great. So can I just ask what your area of interest was when you were training in immunology? So I know DNA vaccines, but were you on the
Yeah.
antibody side, on the T cell
Oh, no, no, no. So actually, yeah,
side?
so it's a long story. When I was training, I actually was focused on autoimmune disease and a model for lupus for SLE. So that's kind of where I concentrated on for my PhD. And then once I left and graduated and went on to do infectious disease at the Harvard School of Public Health, I focused more on HIV at the time towards the end of the 90s, early 2000, in particular in sub-Saharan Africa. The HIV epidemic was really just ballooning. And I felt, a very deep connection to what was happening and wanted to make a contribution, which led to me moving to Botswana in Southern Africa to work on HIV vaccines as part of the Botswana Harvard School of Public Health partnership.
Cool. That's great. Great. I think we probably overlapped a bit there. I was working at the Framingham prison, taking care of HIV positive inmates.
Okay. Oh,
Time.
interesting.
And also
Yeah.
working in West Africa,
Yeah.
bringing HIV treatment to West Africa. So definitely lots of parallels there. I was
Yeah.
actually going to ask you that, whether you had experienced work in developing world countries, because you also have an interest in malaria, right? Isn't that one of the things that you worked on quite a bit?
My career working in sub-Saharan Africa began in HIV, and I worked on establishing a vaccine site there as part of the HIV Vaccine Trials Network. And I was there for about 5 years. And then at that time, I joined PATH, a Program for Appropriate Technology in Health, and they were just about to embark on some of the larger scale studies for the RTSS malaria vaccine in collaboration with GSK, with GlaxoSmithKline.
Cool.
And so I joined PATH and I worked on RTSS for a number of years. And that was also just an amazing opportunity and great experience. Spent, even though I moved back to the US at that time, because when I was in Africa, I lived in Botswana, and worked in the field for about 5 years, then moved back to the US, but was actually working the majority of my time still in Africa. So flying back and forth to Tanzania, Gabon, and other countries where we had the trials for the malaria vaccine ongoing.
Cool. That's great. So did you follow those vaccine trials all the way through today?
Well, I haven't worked on RTSS since I left PATH and joined MedImmune at the time, which was 2009, but I still pay quite a bit of attention to what's happened on RTSS. I have actually several colleagues of mine who worked on RTSS that I work with today, and I've had a fortunate experience of being able to work with folks in a number of different disease areas. So from malaria to COVID, with some of the same folks who worked on RTSS. I consider that really a privilege. But I have followed it, and I understand there was some great news in the New England Journal just recently, actually, with RTSS. So when I joined MedImmune at the time, I joined to focus on RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, which we
From one difficult problem to the next.
I know, challenges. It's all about solving complex challenges. So I moved from HIV to malaria to RSV. I worked on a number of early RSV vaccine candidates that we were developing at MedImmune. We had a CRADA with the NIH at the time, and did some work on some live viral vaccine candidates. And then, we also began to develop a vaccine, a subunit protein, adjuvanted subunit protein vaccine for older adults. And so I saw that through to phase 2B studies. Unfortunately, that program didn't move forward because in a large phase 2B study, we did not meet the primary endpoint of the study. But then we also decided to focus on monoclonal antibody approaches, which is what MedImmune is known for.
Yes.
And as you may know, MedImmune developed Synagis about over 20 years ago. That is the only prophylaxis for RSV used in higher risk infants and children. And it's the only prevention that we have today for RSV in those high risk babies. So we developed a next generation RSV monoclonal antibody, which has been a work in progress for a number of years now. I've been working on that program since we filed the IND. It's called nirsevimab. We had really very successful and promising phase 2B study that we published in the New England Journal of Medicine last year that highlighted just how far we've come. This antibody we can give as a single dose to infants, and we intend for it to cover the entire RSV season. It has an extended half-life, and we just actually announced in collaboration with our partners, Sanofi Pasteur, who are co-developing and co-commercializing this monoclonal with us, the results from our phase 3 study that we just read out from the term infant population, and also a phase 2/3 study in a Synagis eligible population that also read out recently as well. So very exciting.
Yeah.
I feel,
Of course, we've had an outbreak of RSV this year, right? This kind of odd surge in RSV cases in kids. Have you seen?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? With the COVID pandemic, we saw last year, as you well know, following viruses, we did not see as much transmission in the typical winter viral months of some of the other viruses, so both flu and RSV. And what we've seen since, with these, as COVID waxes and wanes, you're seeing outbreaks of these other viruses coming kind of off season. So we've seen that for RSV. And we do predict that this upcoming season could be a pretty significant season for babies with regard to RSV and older adults as well. So, we're definitely keeping track of that and paying attention to that.
So bringing it back to vaccines, because obviously monoclonal antibodies, vaccines, they kind of fight with each other a little bit. But what do you think about the accessibility of these technologies, vaccines and biologics? I think you've had experience in the developing world. So where are you on making these important medicines and vaccines more accessible to people? Do you have a perspective on how you can work towards that goal?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, it's obviously something I think about a lot, and certainly in terms of vaccines, it'd be hard to not acknowledge, right, the incredible work that's been done over the past year in response to COVID-19, and how fast, manufacturers and collaborators, academia, governments have been able to move forward the development of new vaccines and novel technologies, and even things that we'd looked at before, to just run these large scale trials and have successful outcomes of the vaccine studies. I mean, I think it's been just a phenomenal experience to be a part of that. And I think, certainly for us, when we were thinking of our response to COVID-19 and getting involved in vaccine development at AZ with the Oxford, our collaboration with Oxford on the ChAdOx vaccine, central to that was the idea of making this not for profit, especially during the pandemic. We were really committed to that. And I think I'm extremely proud actually to have been in a company that made that commitment to do that. And, I think some technologies are better suited to some environments versus others. But I think, over time, we really have to, as part of our development programs, really think about broad access and equitable access and how we get these technologies out to populations, but always thinking of driving that idea of equity. And I would say, with the pandemic, unless we can get vaccines to everyone, we're not going to get, we're not going to solve the pandemic, right? So what's happening, I mean, the world is just not such right now that you can have an intervention and just focus it in high income countries and, that be the solution. We have to really think about it much more broadly in that. So I think, that's a very interesting thing. I think even with technologies like monoclonal antibodies, we continue to think about ways to broaden access and certainly from a manufacturing standpoint and just technology, there are things we could do today that we weren't able to do 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Ways we can deliver it. And I think but the evolution and those kinds of things will continue to happen. But it is a work in progress, right? And you can do many different things to try to broaden access. And so very interesting conundrum that we have, I think, as a scientific community and drug developers.
I think, International Society for Vaccines is there to try to promote not necessarily equal access to the technology that AZ developed, but improve access to the technology. So distribute, think about how we start making vaccines in Dakar, like they've actually started doing that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can we as a society enhance the ability of developing world countries to produce their own vaccines? How can we train the vaccinologists? So I'm imagining that when you, as a member of ISV, that might be something you'd be interested in.
Oh, I'd be really interested in that. And I would say that those are conversations I have with colleagues continuously at the World Bank and with other stakeholders, because it's something that they continue to think about. And as I mentioned to you, I was a fellow at the World Bank for 2 years. So I took a secondment from AstraZeneca and worked at the World Bank for 2 years, which was a really incredible opportunity as the fellow from the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations. And that, I guess what I learned there, I mean, which was, obviously a very different experience for, a drug developer. But I think, that understanding of how decisions are made, how things happen in different parts of the world, how things are financed in different parts of the world was really critical, I think, and very insightful learnings and thinking to take part in my career. And I think, for me, just having had the opportunity to be in so many different environments, work in different countries, work in different institutions, work in academia, work in industry, work with academics still all the time, trying to bring all these different folks together and have, sort of a meaningful brainstorming and thinking of how we move things forward, I think is really critical to making progress.
Yes.
Because the solution is not going to come from one area.
It's a good place to have conversations at ISV, I think. I think people would also be really interested in hearing if you've had any particular challenges along the way to get to where you are now, or if you want to share your greatest accomplishment, either one of the topics.
Yeah. I thought about what I would think of as the greatest accomplishment. And I certainly have to say, as I mentioned before, having the opportunity to work on our COVID-19 vaccine has been just an incredible life-changing experience. And I don't think, for all of us who worked on it, I don't think we've worked as hard and as fast, and accomplish so much in such a short space of time. And obviously, there are challenges in that, and in a highly tense and charged political environment, as
Mhm.
in the midst of a pandemic, right? Like everybody, everything's just like triple intense. But I can also say that all of the other experiences I've had have been just phenomenal. The ability to live and work in Botswana at the time when the HIV epidemic there was so significant, and doing some of the first vaccine studies, in the region, and the first ones in the country, as well as being able to be part of a team that also brought treatment, into the public health system there. That was pretty phenomenal. And I think malaria, obviously, and just some of the things that partnership was able to put in place to conduct those studies in sub-Saharan Africa was again another life-changing experience. Building hospitals, setting up the sites, educating parents, getting the kids enrolled. That was really, again, another incredible experience. So I can't, I mean, I have to say that they've all been life-changing and incredible things. And of course, RSV, which I talked about because, I've spent really the last decade working on RSV at AstraZeneca. So I think with very exciting, promising candidates. So those have all been phenomenal experiences, and with all of them have come challenges, but certainly challenges at the time that I had to navigate, and some of them were easier than others to navigate. And I think I continue to learn as I move forward, but I can't think of any challenge that I would look at it today and say, didn't get something out of that. I didn't learn something significant that would help me move forward, either in my career or open my mind to thinking a different way, or anything like that. So yeah, I would say I'm fortunate. I don't know. How about you, Annie?
Well, I mean, I think too, and I think that actually your lived experience of working in the developing world really brings a plus to ISV, because we want to really open up the society to more members and get people more engaged. And now that we have the possibility of
Mhm.
meeting virtually, I
Yeah.
think it's really an awesome opportunity to create learning experiences and bridge the gap, so to speak, without actually having to travel.
Yeah.
So hopefully maybe I can enlist you to help me teach vaccines. I'm doing a vaccine course at University of Georgia, where
Okay.
we'll be teaching folks in Mali in
Mhm.
partnership with students at University of Georgia. So I'm thinking that those are the kinds of things that we could do with you at ISB, because you actually have so much experience having worked in countries and brought programs to countries where you can actually build a foundation for the next generation of vaccinologists. So that's a
Absolutely.
so in the last couple of minutes, I just wanted to ask you where you think vaccines are going. What's the next big challenge for vaccines in general? How can we do better? And what are the new technologies that we should be thinking about? What's your vision?
Oh gosh, what well, so many interesting things that, I think with genetic or gene-based, genetic-based vaccines. I mean, I think what we saw in COVID, right, with
Yes.
licensure of RNA vaccine candidates, more viral vector vaccines, and DNA. I think the first DNA vaccine too was licensed in India. So, I mean, to me, in a short space of time, we've made leaps and bounds on technologies that we were working on for years, and didn't get as far ahead as we did in the past couple of months and years. But I think for me, with regard, rather than talking about a specific platform or technology, I do think the next step is what we were talking about before, which is that how do we weave in broad accessibility, improvements in manufacturing, delivery systems, things like that, to actually ensure that vaccines are accessible to everyone, on the planet. And I don't want to be naive about it and say in an unequal way, but definitely that we broaden that, and maybe focusing on that part of it, and supply chains, and doing it more efficiently and in a more cost effective way. And then, I think one of the things we really need to tackle, as we've seen, and it's a whole other can of worms not to get into, but just educating people more about vaccines, about vaccine development. I mean, you
Mhm.
touched on it, and what we could do, particularly in developing countries, but I just think even in high income countries, and where we think people have access to information, can make better decisions, we are certainly seeing challenges with that. And how do we really teach people to understand the value of vaccines, the value of public health, what that means, and take that forward.
How they work, because, it
How
seems
they
to
work.
me,
Yeah.
even in the United States, I think people are really lack the basic information that they need to
Yeah.
make decisions about vaccines like RNA or DNA vaccines. And I
Mhm.
remember when we were first working in West Africa, we were talking about different kinds of vaccines, and the physicians were like, "Oh no, I would never take a DNA vaccine. You should try that on an HIV positive person because." And I'm like, "Whoa."
Yeah. Yeah. Where are we going here? Um, yeah.
It's really an interesting perspective. So there's so much to share and to learn for
Mhm.
ourselves about how people learn to accept vaccines. But also, I think we can all get engaged in educating people about vaccines, even people in relatively privileged levels of society and in the developing world may not have full understanding of the different mechanisms of action of all these platforms. So greater access
Absolutely.
to information, education, sharing of platforms. And before we start making mRNA vaccines in Dakar, maybe we should talk
Mhm.
about how mRNA vaccines work with the new students and new vaccinologists that are emerging there.
Absolutely.
So maybe that's
Absolutely.
a
I mean,
goal we
so
can.
much to do.
There's a goal for ISV. We'll have to talk to Sean about it.
Absolutely. And I'm just thrilled to be a part of that, and totally, I'm on board with, teaching and educating the next generation of vaccinologists.
Excellent, excellent, great. So any last thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
I am, I'm thrilled. Please reach out, and looking forward to being a productive member of ISB.
Great. We really, really appreciate you joining as an ISB fellow. And I personally look forward to seeing you in person at one of these meetings rather than
Absolutely.
an avatar. But hopefully the vaccines that you're working on will help us reach that point. So thank you so much for your contribution to that. And also thank you for joining the International Society for Vaccines. And we'll look forward to talking to you more in the future.
Thank you so much, Annie.